And then there's always my bi-monthly 10-second delay where I'm actually live, but I don't know if I'm live, and I ramble until I can see myself on my other screen. There it is. Perfect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Parents Helping Parents Live. It's now April, which seems crazy to me that the year just keeps ticking by faster and faster and faster as we go. But what are we going to do? We can't stop it. So I'm lucky for spring rain and blooming flowers and trees and everything else. And my wife is really happy that she doesn't have to wear a heavy coat anymore. So we're really happy that you can be joining us. If you're not familiar with Parents Helping Parents, or maybe you're catching this video on somebody else's news feed, maybe somebody shared the YouTube link with you and you didn't get there through the traditional Parents Helping Parents Facebook page. Let me just kind of explain who we are and what we do, and then we'll kind of get on with the main meat and potatoes of the meal tonight. Parents Helping Parents is an Oklahoma-based nonprofit organization that was founded by parents and has the mission to provide parents in the community with resources, education, and shared experiences. In a nutshell, it was founded by a group of parents who had a child that was struggling with addiction or substance use disorder, and they were looking for answers and found out that there wasn't any organizations geared towards helping them find those answers and helping other parents share their experiences and some of the solutions that they found. So they started it. And then, 11, 12 years later, here we are. So currently, Parents Helping Parents has partners in several different cities across the state of Oklahoma, McAlester, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, that host support group meetings for parents. We do some online outreach like we have tonight. And then we do a handful of other things throughout the year. So if you're curious about what we do as an organization, you can check out a couple of different places. You can check us out on the internet at parentshelpingparents.info, or you can go to our Facebook page at Parents Helping Parents Inc. to get that information. If you're on the Facebook video and you're watching, I'm actually going to add the Parents Helping Parents website link into the comments so that you've got easy access to that. One of the things just to be aware of is coming up at the end of the month on the 28th, Parents Helping Parents has their annual fundraising event where we're going to be getting together at the Oklahoma City Zoo, having some food, having a guest speaker, and doing some fundraising to help us keep the mission going and keep the work going. I'm also going to add the link to that into the comment section of the Facebook page. So if you're interested in finding out more about the Hopeful Horizons event, you can click on that link and there we go. So I ask people to do this every week. I don't know how many people do it, but if you're watching right now live on Facebook, click the share button and add this video to your news feed. Let's give a modest estimate. Let's say that you've got 300 Facebook friends, which I think is pretty low. Most of us are rolling a little deeper than that. But let's say you only have 300 Facebook friends. If you share this video, all of those people automatically have access to it. And I can guarantee you, just knowing what I know about the field and doing what I do for a living, somebody out of those 300 people is either struggling with a substance use disorder, has a family member who's struggling with a substance use disorder, or knows someone who is in one of those situations. And so sharing this video on the news feed exponentially increases the amount of people that we can reach with a message of hope and a message of change. And not to be over dramatic, but it quite literally can save somebody's life. If you can share a video on Facebook that actually brings somebody into recovery or prompts a family into support that can help them change, then the impact of that can be it can be really huge. So click the share button, like the things that you hear through the video. If you've got questions tonight about what our guests are talking about, or maybe about what I'm talking about, if we're having a conversation towards the end, there's two ways that you can ask questions. One of those is you can comment directly on the live Facebook feed. I'll be monitoring that for questions. You're more than welcome to chat there, to add comments. Just remember that that's the internet, and everything that happens on the internet is always on the internet now and forever. So you're more than welcome to use that. But if you're concerned about your anonymity, or if you want to ask a question in private that maybe your name's not attached to, we have a private text line that you can send those questions to. I'm the only one that receives those messages, and I delete them at the end of the show. It's just a Google text line that we use for this. And so that number is listed in the title of this video on Facebook. So be sure to use that if you want to ask anonymous questions or you want to reach out and get some additional information. So with that being said, I want to introduce Kim and Vince and Kaylin, right? Did I get that right, guys? Excellent. Last week, I went the whole video trying to introduce our speaker and found out that I was pronouncing his name wrong. So that kind of stuff happens periodically, and it happened to me. So I'm going to see if I can figure out how to put you guys off mute.
I took myself off.
Oh, great. There we go. So I'm gonna hand it over to you guys. I'm really excited for people that kind of don't know what we're doing. This is a family that has a beautiful story of recovery and change. And I think it's going to provide a lot of people with hope. So I'm excited to see you guys again. I know I've met you all before and hear your story. And I'll just turn it over to y'all.
Oh, I'm Kaylin. This is my daughter.
No,
I'm Kim. I'm Kim, my daughter Kaylin, and my husband Vince.
Yeah. And we're very grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you all, share a little bit about our story. And I remember the first time that Kim and I walked into a Parents Helping Parents meeting. I had no idea what it was going to be about. It was at a conference room at Norman Regional Hospital, but we were struggling. We were hurting. Our daughter, Kaylin, was in the throes of addiction. And all I remember is that we went to this meeting and I listened to other parents, and somebody stood up front and gave a testimony or shared their story. And I just left that saying, these are my people. Like, I felt so alone and isolated. We did as a couple trying to raise children, and we just felt lost, and we found direction, and we found great advice, and we found hope through Parents Helping Parents. So I'm very grateful to be able to speak with you all tonight.
Yes, and I spoke actually a few months ago at a Parents Helping Parents Zoom, and it was amazing. I know that Parents Helping Parents really helped my whole family whenever I was in my active addiction. I've been sober since July 24th, 2014, and it is, by the grace of God, Parents Helping Parents, instrumental people that God has put into my life and my parents' lives, my family's lives, that has allowed me to get sober, stay sober, and for us to have a friendship as I'm an adult and active in my recovery. And they get to be instruments of help to other families struggling with the same thing. And I think that is the goal that I want to communicate to families, other people in recovery or addicts, is that you're not alone and there is help. And if anybody can do this, if I can do this, if we can do this, I know that whoever's behind that screen, we can't see anybody, but whoever's behind that screen, that you can do it too, just a day at a time. So do we want to talk about kind of where this all kind of started, or what do you want to?
Yeah, we have done zero preparation.
Yeah, we're just winging it.
We're just winging it because in some ways, Kaylin and I were just talking while setting this up, that this is just part of our life. And it's there, there's some hurt, there's some wounding, there's some tough memories, but there's also joy. And there's a feeling of, like Kaylin was talking about, of restoration. I just cannot tell you. There was a time period I thought that my beautiful daughter and my wonderful, beautiful wife would never be friends. That it would just never happen. And yet I'm not going to tell you that they speak every day, but
almost every day.
Almost every day. I mean, it's just, I get to witness God's grace in healing through their relationship. That was for us three, it was so broken,
And even just preparing tonight, I had to stop and really think about those dark times, because it was a long time ago and she's not that person. And, I think that's an important component, that as people become free of their addiction and they're in recovery, that yes, that was who they were, but that's not who they are today. And there is, forgiveness, there's grace and new hope and Kaylin today. So,
And I just want to share something that I feel so called to share before we kind of dive in deeper. Today at work, I had a patient who was very familiar to me, but I couldn't figure out where. I think I had heard her speak in a 12-step group, but I wasn't sure. And, I asked her, if she, attended this group, was in a 12-step program, is she in recovery? And I almost didn't ask because I was afraid. But I'm glad that I asked because long story short, it was about 5 years ago, and I was at a 12-step group here in Norman sharing my story, and she was sharing her story as well. And this woman, her son, she had at the time been sober about 5 years, but her son battled addiction for a long time. And she, right before she came to come speak, I mean, it was very brief, I mean, days before, she lost her son to drugs and alcohol. And this can happen to anybody.
Mhm.
And hearing her that day, I don't remember what she said, but I remember how she made me feel, of that, God is he's bigger than all of this. And if he can speak through her or any of us, just to give hope to others that, helping yourselves, and maybe, your loved one can find help too. And I think that's the whole thing with, with my parents. In order for me to get sober, they had to let me go. And, I don't mean to speak for you guys, and you can interrupt me anytime, but, I felt my parents, they just wanted their daughter back. And I had found myself lost in addiction, started at a pretty early age, early teen age. And there was something attractive about a double life. I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted to be accepted by everybody. And I wasn't getting that internally, that need that I had, that now I can identify as a God or a higher power, empty hole inside my heart. I was trying to fill that with everything else, acceptance from others, that defined how I felt. So if I could live a double life, and do the things I wanted to do, because drugs and alcohol took away that pressure. It allowed me to not care. It allowed me to just take a deep breath. And whenever I found drugs and alcohol, that was my solution for a long time until it wasn't anymore. And during that time, as an addict, I thought, I'm not hurting anyone around me. I can even remember saying, just let me live my life. Just let me go, let me do my thing. But then I'd be, calling and manipulating. And it was just this cycle of, I would get in with drugs and alcohol, and I'd come out, and my parents, they bailed me out of jail the first time that I went. I got a DUI. This is very transparent. I have no idea who's on the other end there, but I'm an open book. But they bailed me out. And I think that at the time, like most parents would do that. They want to help save their kid. And, it's just this cycle of, I never felt accountable to my actions, because my parents loved me so much. They would do anything, sent me to the best rehabs, bailed me out, all of these things to try and fix me. Well, in my addict mind, I thought, well, consequences don't really apply to me, because I know at the end of the day, they're my parents. They're not going to just leave me high and dry. Well, they did. And that is whenever I started the road to get sober. I could always get sober for, if there was something on the other side, or if I knew that relief was coming, I could always get sober, but I could never stay sober. And it was until they focused on their own recovery and found this community with Parents Helping Parents. That is when nobody was bailing me out. Nobody was coming to rescue me. And I learned really quickly that nobody's gonna save me. So that was just a really poignant moment in my life, and in my recovery. I had to make a decision. And one of the books that a 12-step program that I'm active in, it talks about that, and it talks about the jumping off place of this moment in time where am I going to keep doing this, or am I going to stop? But both choices are absolutely scary and miserable. And I'm just grateful that literally a day at a time, I just put one foot in front of the other, and God did the rest.
Yeah, I'm going to try and come back to what in my mind, I think are key points is, yeah, I mean, just, the war stories. Kaylin had crossed a line with us. I mean, we were in agony. Like the first time she got arrested, we did bail her out of jail. And it was never going to happen again, right?
Yeah, we had it expunged and everything.
Had it expunged, did everything to
Yeah.
help our child be successful, to point them in the right direction. And then when she got arrested the second time for heroin, she called, but we were like, we're not bailing you out, but her granddad did. And I remember just feeling that toughness as a parent, and we were laying in bed and we were like, well, she's in jail. We think she's safe. And I remember hearing a parent say that when they because there were time periods we didn't know where Kaylin was. And she, they were just really, tough times. But what she's referring to is there became a moment through counseling. She was in rehab. We would travel down to go to parents counseling for rehab. And what she's referring to is there was a great moment for us in our marriage that we made a conscious decision as husband and wife that it was not going to be a wedge in our marriage. The second thing was we gained confidence to say it's her decision to be an addict. She's blamed us. We've blamed ourselves. We're going to take responsibility for what we did. We're going to let her have the responsibility of it's her choice to be sober or not. But we started working our program. That became our language.
Right.
She was working her program and we were working our program. But the really hard thing is, and my message to parents, and I've told parents this, and they look at me like, I don't know that I can do that. But our success as husband and wife, our success as individual man and woman, our success as people it became not dependent upon her being sober. And our children's success cannot be the measure of our success. And that was really freeing for us, of blaming ourselves and thinking, what else could we do? And Kaylin hit the nail on the head. I became such a subject matter expert on addiction and recovery, read every book that you could, and I couldn't fix my daughter.
Yeah. And then I think my take home, point with Kaylin is that, as a mom, it was so difficult to see my little girl hurting and what she was doing to herself, and what, I felt like what was happening to our family, because we also had 3 other children at home, and 2 of those children were under the age of 7 at the time. But, I think the breaking point and what we decided as husband and wife, and it's really hard, and I tell this to parents a lot, but we said we can't do life with Kaylin anymore. And we just decided that we were just not going to be in relationship with her. And meaning we sold her car, we turned off her cell phone plan. So she had no transportation and no phone. She didn't really even, I think I packed up a bag of clothes and left them on the front porch. And so she lost everything. And I mean, as a mom, that's so hard, knowing that your daughter has nothing. But it really was a time where I knew that we were so desperate for her, that was all that was left. If we took everything away from her and we were not going to bail her out anymore, and we weren't going to help her, and we weren't going to give her any money or any of those things, then, she was going to have to figure this out on her own. And
that was everything.
Yeah.
And really the key story was she was living in our home temporarily. She was kind of in between, and we found heroin spoons and needles and upstairs where our young sons would go play. And so I remember and I know you do too.
I was in rehab when
Yeah.
this happened.
Yeah, rehab. And but I remember walking you out, and I remember she looked at me and she said, you sold my car. You said that was always going to be my car. And I was like, I know I told you that, but I'm selling your car. And then she said, so you're kicking me out. And I said, yes, we are. But what it never was like, you did this to yourself. This is what you get. We tried. It was none of that victimization or anything. It was really just sticking to the facts.
Mhm.
And the facts were, we love you, but when you're using, we still love you, but we can't do life with you.
Mhm.
And until you make the decision to become clean and sober, then everything in our family will come back to you. But this is your choice, and you need to make your choices.
And I think whenever they said that and meant it by action, and because I said a lot of things in my addiction that I meant with all of my, that's why this is a disease, because I would tell them and I meant it. I'm not going to do this again. I promise you, I'm not going to do it. And sure enough, next day, next hour, there I was. And I didn't understand. I felt so alone. I felt so ashamed. I knew that I was an alcoholic. I knew, and a drug addict. I knew that my life was unmanageable, but I didn't think about, I thought about all the external. Yes, that was unmanageable. I didn't even think about the internal. The internal part was, that was totally broken and completely unmanageable inside. And so whenever they really stuck to, what they had said, I moved back into a sober living house that I had been kicked out of previously, and went back to jail. But they gave me another chance. And I am so glad. I mean, that saved my life, because they took me back. And there was a time period where we didn't talk for a while. I just really tried to focus on putting one foot in front of the other. I didn't know basic life skills. I didn't know how to do the most basic things that normal people, like, all I wanted was like normal people problems. I wanted to pay my bills, but no, I was, I had warrants for my arrest and all of these things, that being sober, newly sober, it was like my world crashed down in front of me and things got worse until I found a solution. And that is with, women in that house that I was surrounding myself with. I was attending 12-step meetings 2 to 3 times a day. I got a job at a Sonic, which initially I thought I was way too good for.
Well, first you were at a nursing home.
Yes, I was at a nursing home, got fired. Then I worked at Sonic, and I just still thought I was above every, that was my MO. That's, I feel like, why I could get sober, but I could never stay sober, because I thought, oh, I've got to figure it out, or, oh my gosh, I've got to go because I'm scared that, these people are going to see the real me and not love me and not accept me. But it was whenever I walked into a room, a 12-step fellowship group, I walked there with my housemates, and I thought, first of all of you all are lying. You're not sober. There's no way you can go through life sober. I mean, truly, these were my thoughts. But I kept coming back, and then I really started to listen. And all of these people, it could be an older man or whoever, they were telling my story of how they felt. It wasn't about the circumstance. It was about the internal condition. It was about the allergy, and it was about the disease. And I related so much to that. So I clung to that. I watched what other people did, and I just tried to put one foot in front of the other. Slowly, they would kind of come back around. They would visit my sober living, and they were pretty short visits. And very, very slowly over time, I feel like you all were watching my actions and not listening to my words, because my words meant nothing. They were of no value.
Yeah, we didn't trust you. And, there's a saying that, for an addict who's in the throw, if their lips are moving, they're lying. And that's how we felt about Kaylin. But we were also working through not being bitter. of being able to, find, new successes, to reestablish a new relationship and not hold ourselves hostage to the past. And I remember, Kaylin, one time in a moment of, I knew that my girl was on the road to recovery, or that I just saw a glimmer of hope. She came up to me and she said, I know all I'm doing is working at Sonic, and but I'll get a better job. And I just said, honey, the last thing I could care about is you working at Sonic. I mean, you be the best car hop they've ever had, but what I care the most about is that today you chose to be sober. And if you'll just wake up every day and choose to be clean and sober, then as your dad, that's all I could ask for. I could care less what you do. And I think that was big.
Yeah, that was big. And to hear them say that and mean that, because my perception growing up, I felt like I just could never meet anyone's expectations. That is what I perceived. That was my reality. Oh, I keep messing up. I keep whatever. Well, I'm blaming my parents because I'm a drug addict, because that made me feel better about myself. But hearing him say that, and I know that he meant it, that's the expectation. Well, that's great. I think I'm doing pretty good at Sonic. I don't have a car, but I'm walking there. And you should share about the coat story.
Oh yeah, Kaylin did call me, and it was cold. It was in November, and it was cold and rainy out. And Kaylin called, and at the time, she was working at Sonic, and we were starting to slowly rebuild this relationship.
I was probably 6 months sober.
Yeah, probably less, or maybe less. Yeah. And she called and said, Mom, I'm cold and I need a coat. And I mean, I just broke down. I can still remember that conversation. And I knew that
I hadn't asked for anything.
She hadn't asked for anything. I had, very few conversations, but I knew I had to go take her a coat. And so I took her a coat, and we had lunch, or I, had a meal together. And just that was the start of us trying to establish a trusting, loving relationship. And I didn't share this in the beginning, but I am a child of an alcoholic mom, and I had a brother who was a drug addict. So I grew up in this home that was very dysfunctional, and what I did was try to control my environment because I couldn't control what was going on in my home. And for anyone who's listening, and maybe you have a similar situation of background, it does feed over into our children, because, as a mom, it was just like, I'm going to fix my child because I want to control these things. And I didn't feel like that I was trying to manipulate her in a way, but it was the only way that I knew, because I knew that I was a mom and I was a fixer, because that is how I grew up, is that I had to fix people and situations. And I still honestly struggle with that still today. So, but I love our story that, God was in the darkest places. And there were so many times that we didn't know what to do. And we prayed a lot, and we really trusted God. And I remember, as I said before, taking all of her things away. And a lot of people will say, I can't believe you didn't give her a cell phone or anything. But, we listened to God. And God, I remember Vince telling me that he went on a walk one day, and God had told him, that Vince, being her dad, he couldn't fix her, but that God was in charge, that God would be able to fix her. And so,
yeah, we're sharing our faith, but I was just distraught, and what I heard from God was, who do you think you are? You need to take care of what you need to take care of, and that's your wife and your other kids, and it's between me and her. And I think that's just such a take-home theme, is we had to give up the sense. I mean, we love our children, and we love Kaylin very much, but that it was our responsibility to not just fix this, but provide the resources to her, or to make everything. We were trying to take ownership of what she did not want us to take ownership of, because part of her childhood was wanting to please us and thinking that she wouldn't live up to our expectations. So somehow we were in this just dysfunctional spiral. And I think honestly, parents and children get into that.
I think it becomes a drug for parents, your child or your loved one, that trying to fix them and
Make their life easier.
becomes a drug and an obsession. And as we our story, and as years went by, things just have gotten better. We've had struggles, of course, but you know what? I was just sharing my mom, I made dinner, and my husband's at home, and I drove over. We moved to Norman to be closer to my parents. Okay. So, and my mom made dinner, and I was just sitting there eating and just thinking about these last almost 8 years. And I looked at my dad and I said, this is all I've ever wanted. This is all we've all ever wanted. It's just peace and harmony and community and relationship. And when conflict comes up, because it does, life happens, we are able to navigate that and go through that together. And today I feel like I know that my parents are proud of me, but that's not something that controls me. Oh, is this going to make my parents proud? Is this going to whatever? I'm responsible for myself. But I know today my parents, they support me and they love me. And still to this day, I feel like their only expectation of me is to literally just try and stay sober today. It's a day at a time.
Absolutely.
And we do not, it's amazing to say this. We do not live in fear of her relapsing. And there's only one reason, because it's a matter of fact, she could, but it is her responsibility to whether she's sober or not. And so there have been times, we are not a perfect family. We've had moments where, again, we got these young kids who are 13, 15 years younger than their sisters. And, during holidays, we've had these clashes, I can't believe you're, doing this for them. And then something comes up from your childhood. And what we don't spend time is going, oh my gosh, I hope she doesn't use. And Kaylin's
we just work it out.
And it's just growth opportunity.
Yeah.
It's just,
we recognize it and we work it out.
Yeah.
We talk about it.
Kim talked about her family history. It's just part of our family. We tell our younger sons, you may be allergic to alcohol. Alcohol is so pervasive, that's just the way that we frame it, that this is a disease, but yet, there's choices that you make. But, Kaylin's husband is also in recovery. And I remember when people were going, oh, that's so wonderful, and they were like, well, are you worried that he's in recovery? And I'd be like, well, and here's the other pro tip. Once Kim and I started getting transparent with our friends and people in the community and not trying to not engage or living behind, an image. Once that we became very open about what was going on in our lives, but not beating people up with our stories, but just like, this is what's going on. But getting back, they would be like, well, are you worried about Kaylin marrying someone who's in recovery? And I was like, well, on the one hand, yeah. But if he chooses to relapse, he chooses to relapse. But if Kaylin were to marry someone who, or into a family that did not, had some stereotypical views of addiction, and what if she did relapse? Would they understand her? And so, it's just, and her and her husband, they're great, loving husband and wife to each other. And he works his program. They're very dedicated to the AA community. And I honestly wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah. And just like you said, if you're struggling, if you're a parent, or if you're someone who's in recovery, who's struggling, or who is an addict or alcoholic, and you found this page, I just want to encourage you to be transparent. and to let other people know what's going on,
Right.
because there is support. I think we're in a society where everything is about the highlight and about the image and everything looking a certain way. And I am so grateful to be free of that bondage with our family, because we get to do things like this. And this, for me, is what keeps me sober. It's just getting on Facebook Live, just sharing what I know. And that's just our experience. So
This disease absolutely thrives in darkness. And so by transparency and shedding light, and that's the one thing that Kaylin's honesty, like sometimes she'll do something and I'll be like, Kaylin, you don't have to like do it to that degree. I mean, she becomes like obsessive compulsive that she's going to be the best, especially as she became a student and she was studying all the time. I was like, hey, you don't have to make an A on everything. And she's like, I'm an addict. I don't do things halfway. And I was like, and we laugh and we
well,
joke
it's
about
because there's a thing, if you're an addict on here, whatever. I struggle with feeling like I have to work twice as hard as the people next to me to feel like I show up as half as good as they are. And that's my own crap that I struggle with every day. Perfectionism, OCD, all of that stuff. I want to be the best because I feel like, I all of these things, I did in my past, but today God has given me the tools and the support and like the success to be able to do that. But perfection is not realistic.
Right.
So I do want to read something from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous real quick. And I think our time's probably up. But this is such a profound, to me, and paragraph, because it talks about the family, and it talks about the addict of, oh, I'm getting sober. Give me a pat on the back for I'm sober now. Where's my new car? Literally, I thought that after my first rehab. So, and keep in mind, this was written in like the 1930s, so the verbiage is a little bit different, but it's on page 82 of Alcoholics Anonymous. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came up out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The last paragraph I'm going to read. This spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. And I think that this is great. It's in the chapter Into Action. And then it goes into talking about the promises of recovery. And, this is just so, it says a lot in those paragraphs, but I think that the main take at home is, consistency, commitment, not having expectations of your loved one, whether that is your addict, alcoholic, or your family. And it's just a day at a time, and just surrendering.
I think that Kaylin, once we were like, we believe you, we can believe what you're saying. We can tell by the fruit of your tree. They weren't just words, because there was a time period you talked about the tornado, and I remember hearing this, that like it was a wheel and the spokes, but in the middle, the hub was Kaylin, and all of us just revolved around her. But yet, we were willingly revolving around her. We were letting her, affect our mood, our behavior, where we were. But we come out of that. We're 8 years past. would we trade or would we go back to that? Not in a million years, right? But what we've learned from it, what we've gleaned, how we've grown, I would be lying if I didn't say our marriage was stronger because we worked our program. But I know that there's a lot of hurting people out here, both, moms and dads, brothers and sisters. I mean, grandparents. I mean, family, friends. I mean, doing life with an addict is not easy, but it only became better when we allowed her to choose her path. That
And we worked our program.
absolutely,
because they were loving me, but they were loving me to death.
and our words became true to her because she would figure out if she could still get away with something, just like she said right there. I loved it. I'm sober now. Where's my new car?
Yeah.
Did we buy her a new car?
No.
She got an old car from her granny.
Later on, yeah, and the brakes didn't work.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it was, but I was so humbled, and I was shown, hey, you're at 0. All right, you're like, God is going to help you go up. Nobody's going to scoot you up. Nobody's going to hand you anything. You're in this by yourself. No one's going to come save you. And that's still true today. My husband, my family, I am responsible for myself. I'm responsible for my actions and my inactions. And we're not perfect, but this is just life today for us. So, okay, I think that's probably time.
Man, I could probably talk with you guys just like for another hour about different things you said. We had just a number of people just in the comments threads thanking you guys for your vulnerability and for sharing your story and what a beautiful message it is and what kind of hope they got from hearing your story and your story of change. And what just a few things that are just kind of rolling around in my head because I'm one of those people, but what's beautiful about you guys' story is the movement from a place where you never thought relationship could be reconciled within your family to a place now where, sorry, I get all choked up sometimes when I hear awesome stories, but to a place where you guys have found restoration individually and as a family, and that's just a really beautiful thing. And there's something that I see as a clinician when I'm working with people, and even as a mentor, no matter in what aspect I might be working with people, whether it's professionally or in a volunteer basis, when I see people getting healthy, it's very clear watching people transition from operating out of ego and out of pride to when they get healthy, operating out of humility and gratitude. And that is all over you guys. And it's just wonderful. So that's my feedback. Nobody had any real specific questions for you guys. Just thank you so much for being here and for doing this and everything that you guys do in the community, I'm sure, and involvement with 12 Steps and sponsorship. And congratulations just on doing the hard work individually and as a family to create change. It's just been awesome.
Thank you so much for having us. And I will just share, and thank you everybody who watched. I needed this so much. And this is, part of my recovery. I needed this. So this may have helped me more than it helped anybody else. So thank you so much for asking us to do this. It was very, very special.
Yeah. And we don't feel that we've crossed the finish line. So I'm going to be very transparent about, the reality of this disease is it's not as common for girls as it is for boys. And we have 2 young developing men in our household. And, sometimes I'll get these moments of fear and paranoia that, oh my gosh, what if they become, addicts? Because that's the family history. But yet I can't live in fear. I can't live in how do I, game and figure out how to prevent that. What I do know, and it's funny, in becoming that subject matter expert, I forget the group, Drug Free America, they just research what's the number one thing that a family can do in order to help prevent this, because parents want to know, what can we do to prevent this, or how can we stop it? And of all the data that they distilled, it's eating dinner together as a family. And so is it necessarily eating dinner? No, I think it's talking with your kids, your wife, your spouse. Hey, how you doing? You're checking in, because everybody has anxiety. Everybody has something they're struggling with. It's that how are you coping with it? And so finding some type of environment, I don't want to be, the modern nuclear family that you have to eat dinner together, but what it is getting together somehow, building confidence in each other that you can share what's going on in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. Hey, thank you guys, honestly, for doing this. For people that are watching, you could have been doing 1,000 things tonight, including watching the Final Four, but you're not. You spent some time with us, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys taking your time out. So thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See ya.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.